Hey, what's up, everyone? This is David Greenspan, and welcoming you back to Season 4 of the Mindshare Podcast. Additional podcasts are available at mindshare101.com and on all the major podcast platforms. This week's episode is sponsored by Kit's Keep in Touch Systems and the Buzz Conference. Be sure to follow The Buzz on Instagram at The Buzz Conference and give them a visit at www.thebuzzconference.com to keep up with everything they're up to, including these two upcoming events. Number one, we got the Buzz Top Leaders Under 35 Summit taking place later this month in just a week's time on September 29th at the Mississauga Grand. And number two, we've got Disruption, scheduled for January 12th, 2023. Be sure to get your tickets at www.thebuzzconference.com. And of course, we are proud to have the Buzz Conference as an ongoing sponsor of the Mindshare Podcast. Kits is also with us as a sponsor, as always. And Kits Marketing is your full-on marketing tool set. This CRM provides you with a bulletproof keep-in-touch solution. Your contact list and your calendar are connected, as well as a complete suite of marketing tools, including a whole series of automation to simplify how you build mindshare so that you get more market share. Your fall market is in full swing right now. If you want to spend less on marketing, drive more leads, as well as repeat and referral business, then you have to check out Kits by going to my site, www.mindshare101.com. And make sure you click on marketing. As you know, we are on a push to get to 100 reviews on iTunes, and so I would like to ask you, if you haven't yet, please take 2 minutes to rate the show. Leave a review. We are making it super easy for you. All you have to do is go to ratethispodcast.com/mindshare101. As always, thank you in advance. Today's episode is number 199. As Chief Operating Officer, he assists the CEO with the implementation of strategic objectives and overseeing daily operations to help steer TRREB, the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board, in a positive direction and achieve optimal service levels and member satisfaction. In a career spanning almost 30 years in the real estate industry, he has held several leadership roles at TRREB in government relations, communications, industry relations, commercial affairs, media relations, and privacy. He is still directly responsible for communications, privacy, media, and government relations, in addition to overseeing the Information Technology Department in his current role as Chief Operating Officer. His role as TRREB's chief lobbyist with all three levels of government extends to other external groups at the federal, provincial, and GTA municipal levels. He has also done advocacy work on behalf of the Canadian banking industry and worked with MPPs in the Ontario Legislature. He possesses a Bachelor of Public Administration honors degree and a Master of Arts in Political Science from the University of Windsor. He has served and continues to serve on committees and task forces at various associations, including the Toronto Region Board of Trade, the Ontario Real Estate Association, and the Canadian Real Estate Association. Joining me on this episode of the Mindshare Podcast is Chief Operating Officer of the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board, Mr. Vaughn Palmer. Vaughn, welcome to the Mindshare Podcast.
Well, thanks, David. I was listening to that introduction and I thought you were talking about someone else.
No, my friend, that is all you, sir. It is an absolute honor to have you on the show today.
No, it's great to be on. I mean, you've got such a solid reputation that I consider this to be a privilege, being asked to be on your show. And I'm actually looking forward to this.
I thank you. I as well, and I think we've got some good topic or a good topic to talk about today. I think that this is, as our listeners and for everybody tuned in right now, as you guys know, we focus a lot of time and effort on mind share and marketing and mindset and trying to really help you raise the level of your business. In this case, though, as we have come off of the past 2 years being what it is, we are walking into some new territory in terms of the market and prices and inflation and interest rates and the narrative that the media has out there. I think that the topic that we've got today, focused around, what you need to know about housing affordability and taxation. I think, Vaughn, that the timing of this couldn't have been better.
Oh, absolutely.
So, look, I just described who you are. Right? I know I read out the bio, but I thought I'd ask you if you could share a little bit more with us. Like, what is your day-to-day focus as COO of like the largest real estate board in the country?
Yeah, it's an interesting job, David. I always joke about this thing. It's one of those things where over the years, I started out in government relations, love GR, and that's obviously dealing with politicians and bureaucrats at all levels, federally, provincially, locally. So that's my first love, right? And I'm still involved in that. That said, over the years at TRREB, and even working in the banking industry and back in real estate, I keep adding things to my portfolio. So, the journey to being COO at TRREB, it's one of those where I haven't dropped anything, I haven't lost anything. So if you ask me what I currently do, well, think about a typical COO. Yeah, that's the job. You're there to assist the CEO, and you are the acting CEO when he's away. But that said, I still have the government relations portfolio. I still have the media relations portfolio. I still have the public relations portfolio. All TRREB's advertising is under my department. I still do the GR at the federal, provincial, local level. We work with CREA, obviously, and OREA. And I've got privacy. People forget about that. I'm TRREB's chief privacy officer. I don't use that. And the entire IT department is under my portfolio as well. So that, to give you a sense of my direct responsibility on a day-to-day basis, that's it. But as CEO, COO, you obviously have to work across the organization with every department.
Okay, so hold on. I got to ask you a question here, and this is totally off the cuff for a moment, but now you're not wearing a hat right now, but you certainly are wearing many hats. And Vaughn, I got to tell you, one of the most challenging things, and I think we can all agree on this one. One of the most challenging things, in a day, is to try to get it all done in a day. The question I would have for you then is based on the amount of hats you're wearing, because I know with our main audience here being realtors, being brokers, um, there's a challenge to try to get it all done in a day. How do you stay so organized?
It's having a great team around you,
Okay.
David. As you can appreciate, with the largest real estate board with 70,000 members, communications is a big issue. I think it's an issue for every organization,
Mhm.
but in particular with TRREB, I mean, realtors are very busy people, right? And so, you're constantly trying to get their attention, trying to share information that's important. So for me, that's top of mind, and that's usually where I focus. And you have a good team around you, and it allows you to then focus on the things that matter. And for me, it's keeping my eye on the ball. And so communication, to make sure that everything that's critical, that's important, that members need to know about, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's GR, technology, or whatever, is that we stay on top of that. Now, ultimately, you can't force members to read, but what you can do is serve up the product in a way that hopefully they pay attention. And we track all those things in terms of open rates and that type of stuff. So generally what I do, you're right, there's all kinds of things coming at me every day, but you tend to focus, and I sort of break it down to say, look, our members come first, right? So what are the critical things that we need to stay on top of and make sure that members are not being left in the dark, and that they're getting the information that they need. Everything else revolves around that, right? So whether we're talking about things that help them improve their business, if we're lobbying and dealing with people on the outside, all that stuff revolves around members first, serve your members.
Okay. No, you know what? It's I'm with you there. And the communication is imperative, right? I mean, when you've got a good line of communication, no matter what the maybe final outcome is, when people feel in the know and they feel part of that, I believe that goes a long way to be able to, take that next step in whatever it be. So, as we talk about that, what are some of the bigger issues which you are specifically focusing on at this exact moment in time? What are some of those things there? And maybe I'll double down on that, Vaughn, and ask you, what do you feel that our realtors need to be aware of right now?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, David. I always say, I did a presentation yesterday, one of the brokerages. I said, look, everything you guys do is controlled by public policy, by legislation. It's controlled by government actions. Doesn't matter whether or not you guys like it. That's just the way it is. In our business, we know that we have what is currently the Real Estate and Business Brokers Act. That's about to change the Trust and Real Estate Services Act. So members need to be mindful of that. And the reason why I raise that point is this: government intervention in our business, it's not going away. In fact, it's starting to ramp up. Uh, Real estate is an easy target, right? We're the economic engine. That's the reason why, because we matter. And because we drive the economy, And you alluded to some of the numbers, but if you break it down for each real estate transaction, $70,000 in economic spin-offs that goes into the general economy, right? So there's a lot of industries that revolve around real estate. And because of that power, politicians pay attention. And when you've gone through a pandemic where real estate seemed to come out of that unscathed, if anything, as you know, things ramped up. And so we're all left scratching our heads. Wow, what's going on here? So because of that, government intervention, they're scrambling. Affordability is top of mind. It's a big issue. There's been elections, and when they're faced with that, politicians make promises, right? Yeah, we're going to help with affordability. We'll help you guys buy homes. We'll make it affordable for you guys. Well, when you make those promises, now you got to deliver. And usually, what they end up doing is to focus on what we call demand side policies, i.e., increase taxes, see if you can suppress demand, see if you can make that go away. Hopefully that will bring the price down. And we've always said that's the wrong approach. Guys, and we've been saying this for 6 years now, supply is a problem. If you guys focus on the right issues and find ways to facilitate supply, I think we'll be better off for that.
Okay, let's get there, because housing supply challenges, continue to be very real. We know that's an issue. We know that there's a supply and demand here in Canada issue. And in a recent election, the government did promise to build a lot of new roofs each year. But it seems they might have gone above and beyond with those promises. And most recently, just a couple of weeks ago, the Fed said they will be building 17,000 homes at approximately cost of $2 billion. Now, when you start to run the math, the numbers on there like $120,000 or whatever it is per unit, but they seem very focused on affordable, low-income housing solutions. And look, I'm not going to downplay that. Absolutely an important aspect. However, where do we find a solution for those that are, and again, I gotta make sure I say this properly when I say those that are hardworking. And let me clarify that, because I don't know if that came out properly for anybody here right now, but the people that are bringing in an income on a regular basis, the people that are going to work on a regular basis, those people are having some real troubles still affording houses here in Canada in today's market. So I guess where I'm asking is what kind of solutions could be or should be options for this group as well? So again, when we say we've got our, low income, affordable housing, great, we've got that group, but we've got this bigger group that goes to work every day, has their jobs, makes ends meet, is focused on, supporting the family unit. How do we find solutions that like what kind of solutions could we make for this group is really where I'm going with the question there.
Yeah, and that's a group that votes, right?
But I mean, this is why I say
Yeah.
we can go at it head on and say bang on. Those are the people that are just
Yeah.
they go to work every day,
Yeah.
right? And yes, they're the group that's going to vote.
Well, it's and I think you framed that properly, David, to say, look, there's a spectrum, right? And we think there's a role for every type of housing. So we can talk about the rental space. Well, there's a role for that as well.
Mhm.
There's a role for low income housing, what we call, affordable housing or nonprofit housing. But our concern as an industry is about home ownership, right? Home ownership is where it's at. Rental is a big part of MLS, and we hope that people make the transition into home ownership. Now, it's not for everyone, but to your point, it's that sweet spot in the middle, and that's the bulk. And we call them middle class. You can call them anything you want, but that's a critical element that we're trying to serve. And when you look at politicians and they make promises, and we're trying to solve this housing affordability problem, that's it. So let's start with that. And this is sort of going back to an earlier question that you asked. What should members know? What should members be aware of that in terms of our focus at TRREB and when we talk about GR? Well, I mentioned the government intervention in their business, and that is true. But what's equally true, though, is the reason why we lobby, the reason why we engage politicians and bureaucrats and all that stuff is because, we're trying to help members serve the client. And so, as a real estate association, you've got a job that's twofold. One, your members come first, right? So you're trying to protect them. But also what's more important, though, is make it easier for the clients to afford to buy homes. And that's really get to the heart of your question. There's no silver bullet, though. And the problem is this, politicians will respond to things that will get them elected. And now everyone's on the bandwagon. I wish they'd listened to us 5 or 6 years ago when we said, guys, supply is the issue. You guys are focused on taxation. That won't solve anything. And then what they did was they went after solutions like foreign buyer taxes. I go, it may make you feel good about yourself, but it's low hanging fruit. It may get you elected because we know that it's politically popular to blame people who don't live here and say, hey, they're the problem. But we show them the numbers to say, but that won't even change supply. I go,
Right.
the supply issues that we're facing is domestic, it's internal, and we need to start thinking long term. There's no silver bullet, right? So let's break that down. So what does that mean? Well, there's 3 levels of government involved in this. We got the Fed, and the Feds, they're actually the most removed from consumers, right? They are.
Hmm.
They should be focused on defense and foreign affairs and all this stuff. But they've got the power, they've got the dollars, and they get involved. So let's just start with that. Overarching issue: housing supply. We all agree. We're proud of that because we changed that conversation. Now everyone's talking about supply. The Feds are
Hmm.
talking about that, the province at the local level. So now, good. We recognize that. How do we fix this? Well, this is where the challenges start. Governments you can't build homes. We have what they call low nonprofit housing. And yes, you can construct that, but that's old school thinking.
Right.
What they should be doing is facilitate the private sector to build homes. And what that means is that you get out of the way. So, red tape. That's a big problem. If you talk to the home builders, they'll tell you it can take 10 years from start to finish, to actually get the home built. Well, that's a problem that's created by bureaucracy and inefficiency. So let's start with that.
That's what that's where I was going to go. Like, where do we see being able to break the bottleneck? Right. What needs to happen? And it certainly seems, and I mean, again, through previous conversations on this topic, it certainly seems like it almost boils down to the simplicity of like more shovels in the ground a lot faster.
Mhm.
Right. Because
Eh,
as you just said,
yeah,
it number I actually didn't realize that a decade to actually go through and make this
yeah.
stuff happen. That's a
It,
long time.
it takes a long time. And I know the Feds are scratching their heads thinking, well, how do we influence that? Because really, that decision is made at the local level. At the local level. But the Feds are getting smart, though. Trudeau made this promise, and now the official opposition is trying to double down on that to say, you know what, we've got all these transfer payments that we give to the provinces on the local level. Why don't we tie that in with their ability to bring supply online, to get out of the way, remove the roadblocks? So that's a good step, and that will
Mhm.
make a difference. So moving down provincially, well, how does this whole housing supply thing play out? Well, you got to give the premier credit. They've been trying. They've run in legislation, more homes, more choice. They had a housing task force, all kinds of recommendations. Some of the key ones have not been acted on, but I'll explain that in a second. But they're doing all they can to say, let's remove all the roadblocks and empower the local level to make things happen. So let's go to the local level. What are they
Mhm.
doing? Well, the mayor in Toronto, if you use that as an example, just announced a 5-point plan, a plan that we're really thrilled about because it reflects everything
Oh,
we've
that's
been
good.
lobbying for, right?
Okay, that's good.
And so when you start with housing supply, and he's created a separate division to say, that 10-year period that I mentioned, we need to shorten that time frame. And that's the reason why the premier, by the way, gave the mayor those additional powers. So Toronto is getting it, Ottawa is getting it, and they promised to expand that across the province. It will give the mayor the ability to veto council decisions when he's trying to fast track some of these things. It will allow him to hire some of the key people, department heads, the CEO, CAO, as they call it, at the local level. So it will give the mayor the power to do certain things, and that hopefully should make a difference. So the mayor is starting to act, and we've identified one thing, which, by the way, the Premier's task force identified, which is zoning. You see, what people don't realize in the city of Toronto, case in point, I have no doubt this will play out across the country, is that 70% of the land that is zoned residential, David, is for single family homes. So we talk a good game about density. And I'm not talking about high rise
Yeah,
buildings.
yeah,
I'm talking about duplexes,
yeah.
triplex, a fourplex, 4 units, not allowed in most of the residential neighborhoods in Toronto. It's called exclusionary zoning. So we need to start to relax some of that stuff. And that came out of the Premier's task force. They haven't acted yet because there's pushback on the local level because, they're not in my backyard. People start to push back. But that's a key element to say that's how you start to bring supply online. You start to look at some of these things.
Okay, some really good points there, and I like the way you said about how it gets influenced. I think that it seems like there's some positive stuff going then at the local level, which is obviously a step in the right direction. Looking at the changes that might be happening, when we go right to the other side of things and say at the federal level, it seems like we might get a little bit of traction there. But again, of course, everything is very much left to be seen. So then, the question I would have based on all of that would be, can we as an industry, not just simply as a government at the various levels, but we as an industry, is there any way for us to influence this? Our more specifically for our realtors, us to influence all of this?
I think so. And there's two things. Always people have to be mindful of the fact that as an industry, the insurance guys can probably say the same thing. Realtors are plugged in. You and I had an offline chat about, baseball and things you do with kids, right? Well,
People are laughing right now. They're like, Dave is always talking about baseball. Go Jays.
Yeah, I know. But it's true. And it kind of ties into the question that you asked, some of those parents that you're involved with come from all walks of life. Some of them are politicians. Some of them may be bureaucrats or have some type of influence. And I always say to realtors, talk to them, raise these issues, the types of conversations that we have that you and I are talking about, whether it's taxation or what have you, you've got their attention, in a format where they're willing to listen to you. So don't just wait for the associations to step up, which we do, but talk to them. And we try and make it easy to say, I always say to members, pay attention to some of those communications that we put out. I know that you've been bombarded with stuff, but when we ask you to do things like, here, send an email, we will actually make it easy. You don't have to do a lot of thinking. But those emails, exactly. And in fact, we've made it easy, David. You members will see that shortly with the election where, we have preset paragraphs that you can just, I like this one looks good, click, and you're good to go. The mayor gets that, the candidates get that, the councilors get that. It makes a difference. And they pay attention to that. So that's how you make change, but it's drip, 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 right?
And I definitely want to double down on that. And again, to all of our listeners, the audience, grateful that you guys are always here. So thank you. But you hear me say this on a regular basis about communication, about education, about really being a conduit of information. And we've talked about this before. And Vaughn, you and I mentioned this. I brought this up offline before we got started, and I want to bring it up again. But there is a narrative out there around what's going on with our industry, how things are starting to go down. And there might be a shift, but it's not a bad market. We're not exploding. We're not going through that type of stuff. And if we as an industry, realtors, can listen to the communications that you guys are putting out, take those communications and leverage them to share those with our audience. If we can have a verbal conversation with even one person, we are starting to affect the narrative that the bigger mainstream media puts out there. They've got a very big reach, but we as individuals also have a very big reach. And, if we can, again, keep those lines of communication open, we can affect this. We can influence what happens out there.
I agree. And we have to be honest, right? Most of what we see in our business in real estate, look, it's your biggest financial transaction, and rightfully so.
Yep.
The public is concerned. And so when they see the headlines, to your point, or they see governments making certain moves, people, you may still have a big bank account, you may still be gainfully employed, but it makes you nervous, right? Mm-hmm. You're thinking, oh, geez, is now the right time for me to sell, to buy, or what have you. So, a lot of it is psychological. And that's the reason why, we always say a couple of things. Governments need to get out of the way. Mm-hmm. And, by that, I'll give you some examples. The mortgage stress test, right?
I want to get into that as well with you. Okay, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. No. I'm with you there. Sorry to interrupt. I 100%.
And maybe I should hold off on that till we get.
Okay, I'll bring that back up in a moment.
Okay.
Here, I was going to bring up the topic of taxation issues,
right,
and the fact that they are ever present. We do know that all levels of government, as we've just been talking about, let's just put it out there, they're looking for money. I get it. That's fine. It makes the world go round. We know that Toronto has brought in a special land transfer tax, otherwise known as the MLTT, in a market that was already unaffordable. And they're not the only city in Canada. Let's put that out there. But this has certainly added to the affordability problem, again, in a city that already has an affordability problem. So I guess getting into that part of the conversation, what is your thought on these special taxes in a city like Toronto? When if somebody was to go north, like we talk about, like just north of Steeles or just AKA beyond the GTA, they wouldn't have to pay this stuff. Do you see this type of thing spreading to other cities? I guess is the bigger question, because we do have a national audience. We do have people that are, not just obviously in Toronto or even on Ontario. Do you see something like this spreading to the other cities and the impact?
Yeah, it's yeah, and I'll get to that in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Just want to finish a thought that you started
Sorry,
about.
forgive me.
No, 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 no. It's important to say people are gainfully employed. We hear talk about a recession, and people say, see the headlines, is the market collapsing or whatever. No, the unemployment rate is under 6%. Nationally, it's about 5.4, and the
Mhm.
GTA it's still under 6%. So people have jobs, and that's a market fundamental that's important for real estate. And then we look at federal policy like immigration. We still have people. In fact, they've ramped that up, and so there's that. There's still demand, which means that the price, the support for price, will always be there. At least that's what we project. People think that price is going to collapse. Well, hang on a second. There's more demand than supply, right? It's a market fundamental. People are still gainfully employed. That will support price. So the market is not collapsing. So let's start with that. And when politicians look at that, they think, well, here's low hanging fruit. We can tax this, right? It's easy money.
Mhm.
So now you raise a good example of a land transfer tax. Let's start with that. The reason why that's low hanging fruit is it impacts about 5% of the population in any given year. So property tax impacts everyone. So politicians know that. They won't raise property taxes, which they should, to fund services that everyone benefits from. They won't do that because that's a political problem. So they'll go after special taxes like the land transfer tax. It's only 5%. I can afford to piss off the 5% than the other 95% or 100%, right?
Logical.
Well,
I mean, logical
yeah,
answer to that for
it,
sure. And you can see the logic be from their
for
side, whether you
sure.
agree or not.
Can argue against that,
Yep.
right? That's the way they think. And so when you ask the question, will the land transfer tax spread? Well, I remember that battle back in 2007, 2008. In fact, we won the first vote against the mayor. He had never lost a vote, and he threatened to shut down the city. So he got his revenue sources, and that's how he ended up getting the land transfer tax. The province gave the city of Toronto the power to do that. No other municipality, by the way, has that power across the province. Other provinces have similar taxes,
Right.
but in
Yep.
this province,
Mhm.
that's not the case. They're asking for that though. So every other municipality wants a land transfer tax. Mississauga wants it, Ottawa wants that, and depends on who is in power at Queen's Park. They've said no, and I hope it stays that way. And this is the battle, and this is what we're always constantly pushing back against to say, don't give them those powers because they'll use it. We went through that with the city of Toronto, right? The mayor promised not to use it back in the day, and people were saying, "Oh, they won't use that. Give them the powers." Well, they did, and now they're threatening to increase that in terms of what they call speculation taxes. Their definition of that is to say, if you have a home that's over $2 million, you're doing well. You're going to tax that portion over $2 million. Well, David, you and I know what's the average price in Toronto right now. It's 1.2, 1.3. If you look at the detached homes, it's about $2 million. So that's not a wealthy person. That's a person who's just trying to survive and buy a home. But that land transfer tax spreading across the province is always a threat. And so you got to keep an eye on that. But they need provincial permission to do that. They
To
don't
make
have
that
that.
happen.
Yeah. And, and,
Ne-
and, there's, and there's related taxes too, right? You mentioned land transfer tax, but there's things like development charges and others. And I'll leave you with a thought. The average price property in Toronto right now, how much of that is taxation? $350,000. This is the average price property in Toronto that are government fees and charges, right? So if you back that out, you can see how that impacts affordability.
Hands down, absolutely it does. And you just brought up the spec tax, speculation tax. Ontario and BC will tell us that they've already, brought it in. Was it too little, too late? Is it a magic wand? And on either side, what do realtors really need to know about that?
Yeah, it's things are a little crazy out west. It's what I call the wild wild west, right? They've got all kinds of speculation taxes, and they were the first ones to implement the vacant homes tax, which we're getting that in Toronto as well. They just increased that rate to 3% out west. So they always seem to go first when it comes to taxation. And then our politicians get ideas and think, hey, why don't we do the
Yeah,
same
wait a
thing?
second.
Right?
Look what
Yeah,
they're doing.
exactly. Yeah, you guys are collecting money. Why not, right? So it's just a different animal out there. I don't know what to make of British Columbia and Vancouver in particular. But that said, the whole speculation tax, it gets very convoluted and complicated because you've got the local aspect, and we say speculation tax. Really, the land transfer tax is what it is.
Mhm.
And what they're trying to do is they're asking the province for permission to say, if it's not your principal residence, we should increase the land transfer tax on those homes. So that's how they're hoping to get that, what they call a speculation tax. So that's locally, but then you have the feds who get involved, and even the province. The province has a foreign buyers tax. That's a speculation tax as well. And then at
Mhm.
the national level, you've got the feds saying, "Hey, we want a vacant homes tax as well." Well, let's think about that for a
Yeah.
second. Out west, they've got it at the local level, provincially. Now you have three vacant homes taxes, so it's
Wow.
adding up, right? And Toronto just approved that. Ottawa just approved that. And so these are all speculation type taxes. And last word on the vacant homes tax, the city of Toronto, we recognize that it's hard to push back against that, right? Because with this supply crisis that we're going through, politicians will tell you, and I don't have a comeback for that. Say, well, Vaughn, homes are for people to live in, right? So I don't care about people speculating or using that as an investment. We want to increase supply. So if we bring in a vacant homes tax, it will force people to either rent out the property or sell it. Either way, it increases supply. And I go, you got a point. And Mr. Politician, Madam Politician, if
Mhm.
you're successful in doing that, it will put the vacant homes tax out of business because you shouldn't collect a dime. If you're
Right.
collecting money, it means that it's not bringing in supply onto the marketplace, which makes it a
Right.
revenue generating thing, right? They'll deny that. But that's actually the reason why they want the vacant homes tax. So that's an interesting ballgame. But
Very.
and we said, don't fight that. It's a losing battle, but we focus on the exemptions. And that's how we got around that. Exempt principal residence protects the snowbirds. If people are sick, that shouldn't be an issue. If there's a rental restriction, if there's a death, if the property changes ownership in that particular year, like there's a laundry list of things, David, that we came up with, we lobbied for, and we got every single one of them.
Amazing. That is awesome. So here's what feds have had a question on our tax returns for a number of years now that asked if we have a principal residence. Um, Looking at the capital gains tax, do we see a capital gains tax coming down the line? Are we about to get a surprise anywhere?
That, I know the people who say this will never happen. The fact that we're talking about this tells you that it's a threat.
I mean,
Um,
we've been reading about it for a while now.
oh, absolutely. And they deny that, right? The feds have denied that. They said, no, we're not thinking of doing this. But we know that they're funding studies through CMHC and academics out west to say, look, if we were to do this, right, this kind of sounds familiar. If we were to do this, this is how we'll do it. Well, okay. Are you guys doing this or not? I think that if they can get away with it, with a capital gains tax on your principal residence, they'll do it. The reason why they're not doing that is because the polling has told them it's a bad idea. Our internal polling tells us the same thing. Uh, People will be up in arms, right? That's not what they signed up for. Come on, it's a cultural thing. We've all been buying homes for years. We don't have what the Americans have in terms of writing out the mortgage interest. This
Right.
is what we have. You have capital gains exemption on your biggest investment. People rely on that for retirement. So they know that. And we call them out on that. And that's what makes them nervous, right? They know that they can't head down that path. But look at what they've done, though, Dave. They're getting close. What they've done is to say, they said, okay, fine, we won't bring in the capital gains tax because we'll get crucified if we were to do that. But what we can do is we can start to tinker around the edges. They ended up doing what we have always known in the business. If you buy a principal residence and you
Mhm.
sell it in, say, the first 12 months, like, was that really your principal residence? Well, you're going to pay tax on that. That's speculation, right?
Right.
They've crystallized that into legislation, into law to say, okay, if that were to happen, you'll get taxed. But that's the way the market has always performed, and that's the
Mhm.
way it's always been that way. So that said, what's to stop them from expanding that to 2 years, or maybe three, maybe five? Right? All of a sudden, what was a principal residence? You're being told
I
that
see
if
where
you
you're
don't
going
live
with
in
this.
that house for 5 or 10 years, you're going to pay tax on that.
I see where you're going with that. So
Yeah,
they may not bring this one in because they know how poorly that will do for them. However, they could increase that one and basically say, "Hey, yeah, look over here while we work over there."
you got it through the back
Yeah,
door.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, as we talk about again, and I'll go to it just because again, from where your board is located, are there initiatives in place to make, or working in place, to assist people in Toronto that are working in Toronto, to make real estate more affordable, therefore keeping people in Toronto rather than having them move to surrounding areas? Because again, we saw over the past 2 years, and
Hmm.
I probably should predicate some of that and say, or preface that and say that people thinking they could work virtually did start to just go to different places up north or whatever it be, just because again it was a nicer place to be able to work.
Hmm.
People are being forced back into work, and obviously have gone back to that. And so again, you've got a very busy city of Toronto as it always has been. Do we see any solutions for keeping people more focused to the city of Toronto than pushing them out based on everything that's there?
Yeah, when you look at, we do this consumer research and we do polling with Ipsos every year, and we ask people their preferences. If you're in the city of Toronto in the 416, is that your preference? Do you want to stay within the 416? Do you want to move out to the 905 or beyond?
Hmm.
But almost always, when you talk to people within their particular, jurisdiction or what have you, they actually prefer to stay there. So, 416 people prefer to stay in the 416.
Hmm.
But affordability is what's driving them out. Now the
That's
pandemic
the issue.
turns out as well, right? And so it's not by choice. It's maybe the second, third choice. But that said, you sort of feel sorry for millennials right now and the younger generations who say, can we actually stay in the neighborhoods that we grew up? But or maybe it's always been that way. I don't know. We people complain about how expensive housing is, but maybe everything's relative, right, David? If you go back 10 or 20 years, chances are people complain about the same thing. But what are we doing to help that? Well, look, all you can do is, and I know you alluded to that. The bank of mom and dad looms large right now. Not everyone is in that position to help their kids, but you may have other family members, and our polling shows that about anywhere from 17 to 25% of the down payment that people are actually coming up with is coming from family and friends. So people are getting help. That's one way they're doing that. Now, most people may not be in that position to get that help, and this is where government programs come into play. And there are a few examples out there, like at the national level. We can talk about things like the RRSP Home Buyers Plan. Now, mind you, you got to save, and
Hmm.
you need to have skin in the game. But you can save. I think it's 35,000 a person, $70,000 a couple. That money that's tax free. You get the tax advantage, and when you take it out to buy a house, you don't get taxed on that as long as you put it back over time.
Right.
So those types of programs at the local level and provincially as well. The land transfer tax, which is a huge chunk of cash that you have to pay up front. So on the average price home in Toronto right now at $1 million or 1.2, you're paying like $70,000-$80,000 in land transfer taxes up front, both provincially and locally. Now,
A lot of money.
a lot of money. Are you getting help with that? Well, there's rebates, right? With some of the things that we lobbied for, which helps. You get that rebate, you get maybe $10,000 back. It makes a difference. That said, this is some of the things that we do behind the scenes that people are not aware of. Where city staff are trying to get rid of that. And we're like, guys, come on. It's bad enough that we have the tax and now people have the rebate and you want to take that away. So those types of government programs, I think, is very important to help people. And Trudeau came up with another one, which is a combination of a TFSA, if people understand that, and the RRSP Home Buyers Plan. What that means is you put the money in, it goes in tax free. You get the tax break. When you take it out, you don't get taxed on that either. And the growth within the plan is all tax free. So all these different things help.
We brought this up. We did talk about this before, and I continue to ask this question often about where are people getting all the money, and you certainly did just allude to that. I mean, I've been told much of the time it's been it's gifted. I know when we had Mr. Benjamin Tal on the show earlier this year, that's what he said, and he said a lot of it's gifting, and I had asked is foreign or is it domestic? Um, a lot of it is coming from overseas. A lot of it is foreign money, and across Canada markets have gotten so far ahead of economics. Wage inflation is not going to catch people up. What do we see as the solution, or do we see a solution at all?
Huh. I
I loaded for sure, Vaughn. I know
Yeah, yeah.
it's one of those where, and I'll give you again as you're thinking
Mhm.
about that for a moment. Like as we saw people who I'll use round numbers for the sake of it, but they got qualified to go and buy a house that was 750. List was 750. Somehow they went and offered 850, but then it went over asking and they bought for 1.2.
Yeah,
Where did you get that money from?
yeah,
And
yeah.
what's going to happen in a few years when? And I know we're looking at sort of this inverted sort of idea around the rates and whatnot, and what's
Mhm,
actually kind of maybe coming down the pipe in about a year and a half, where we might see them come back down. But I've also
mhm,
got this thought on me that says, when people come up for renewal,
mhm.
are they gonna be able to afford to renew that home?
Yeah, it's well, and think about what the way you map that out. Most people who buy homes will take out a mortgage, right?
Mhm,
Now, we also have a generation of home buyers that have been, sort of a socialized or gotten used to mortgage rates of 2%, less than 2%, less than 3%. And that's been going on for quite a while. So, to answer your question directly, when renewals come up, a
mhm,
lot of people are in for a huge surprise, shock. All of a sudden, mortgage rates are over 5%, 6%, double what you used to pay, triple. How can people afford that? Will they be able to afford that? Isn't that what led to the crisis in the United States? Well, that was a little different because those were subprime
mhm.
mortgages. We don't have that problem, but people will still have to deal with that. And that's the reason why they brought in the mortgage stress test. And we've always said it played a role. You qualify people with 2 percentage points higher.
Mhm.
That way, and it's a bit of a buffer, right? And when rates go up, hopefully they'll be able to afford that on renewal. But have we taken that too far? When you bring in these policies, use a mortgage stress test case in point. What that says is that you will be qualified at two plus 2 percentage points over the prevailing rate, which is 5.25, which is what the OSFI has set,
Mhm.
or 2 percentage points above the contract rate that you get, whichever is higher, right? So now at 5.25, people have to be qualified at roughly about 7.25%. Well, you know, and rates continue to go up, or whichever is higher. So when your contract rate, when you go to the bank and they say, yeah, we'll give you a mortgage now for, whether it's 5.5 or 6%, add 2 points, they're going to qualify you at that level. So in a lower interest rate environment,
Mhm.
that makes sense. But when that's rising and then the renewal comes up and they say, we'll qualify you at that much higher rate, even though you've been paying your mortgage, for the past 5 years and we know you can afford it, but isn't that a threat? Like, what if, people, because of your rules, can no longer qualify? Meanwhile, they can still afford the mortgage payments. That's a problem. And that's one of the things we've been calling for. Also, the Office of Superintendent of Financial Institutions, they deal with the mortgage stress test. And we said, guys, it's time to review the rules, right? Does that does that make sense anymore? We're not saying get rid of the mortgage stress test, but surely you guys can look at what the current interest rates are, current mortgage rates, and make the tweaks, make the adjustments, right? There's other things you can look at, mortgage amortization. Why not allow for longer periods, 35 years, 40 years? That will help with affordability. I know people are saying, yeah, but you're buying real estate. It's a good investment. You stretch it out over a longer period of time. That will help with lower your monthly payments. So there are things that they can do at the federal level that will certainly help with affordability in the short term.
See, I was gonna I was gonna sort of walk right into that, but you've already covered that. Like, I mean, again, my thought being, yes, just because a property is not selling in 30 or 60, 90 seconds, and it may take 30 or 60, 90 days instead now. Again, we're not in a bad market. Things are not bad. And as we do talk about rates, Vaughn, they're not running away, like they did in the 90s.
No.
Right? They're not doing that. And I was going to ask you, do you feel that this is making it harder for people to afford? Is this a good thing at the current moment? But you just answered that, by
Yeah,
sharing that.
yeah. It's and to your point, it's when I say get out of the way, it's there's the taxation end of things. So, and we've talked a great length about what they are, and going back to when I said the average price in Toronto, average price property, you're paying $350,000 in government fees, and for
Wow.
the average condo, it's almost 200,000. So, don't tell me that you guys can't, give home buyers a break when it comes to that. That will certainly help with affordability. But obviously they won't do that. It's low hanging fruit, like I said. But let's remove the taxation. What are some of the other things that potentially is a problem? Well, it's not helpful when you have the feds, for instance, playing politics and saying, this whole closed offer process. I'm calling it that. They call it blind bidding. I
Yeah.
don't like that term because blind bidding. Well, hang on a second. It's
That's got a
enshrined
negative
in.
connotation to it.
That's
That's
right.
not what it is. Yeah.
And it's illegal, right? It's in the act. It's in the Real Estate Act. The Real Estate Act says, I think your listenership and your viewers know this, but the Real Estate Act is very clear. It says when you have competing offers for a property, you can share the number of offers. So, David is trying to sell his property, 10 offers. You can
Hmm.
share the fact that there's 10 offers.
Hmm.
What you can't do, though, is share the details of the offer.
Right.
The price, the people who are offering, or the conditions that people have put forward. So the act is very clear on that point. But the feds are saying, "Oh no, this blind bidding thing is to blame for the rise in prices. We should get rid of it. Everything should be open. Forget the closed offer process." Well, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. Finish that
Yeah,
thought.
yeah. No, and that's another example of you getting in the way. Because what are the facts? Well, the facts don't support that. Couple of things. It's provincial jurisdiction, so I don't know why
Hmm.
the feds are threatening to get involved and make it a criminal issue to,
I'm going to come
and
back to that point in one
you know,
second. Yeah.
okay, and then and I'll make the last thought. The provincial level is that's they make up those rules, but you know what? I'll let you jump in before I expand on what we're doing at the provincial level to deal with that issue.
Look, from a federal perspective, and this was my thought, my initial thought, and this was conversations that I'd had when this whole thing sort of came out 12 months ago, maybe, as they started
Yeah,
talking about this stuff.
yeah,
It was this thought of, you know, I, the homeowner, decide not to involve my realtor and I do the deal anyways, even though I've got this contract with them. Realtor's going, I had nothing to do with it. All of a sudden, something goes awkward. We've got this whole federal thing in place now with a criminal code that's in place. Who's actually liable?
yeah.
And unfortunately, if there is, ink on paper from the realtor is right there as a guilty party, which they have nothing to do with it because the actual homeowner or seller just didn't know that they needed to involve the realtor. And now the realtor is going to bear
Right.
their brunt. To me, the logic of it all, it is not there. There is zero logic to how this is going to be policed. How do you police something like that from a federal level? And maybe that's not even something you got to respond to. It's just a
Mhm.
comment as you bring that part up. This has been something that's been going through my mind.
It makes no sense, and we're hoping that they'll listen to logic on this issue,
Mhm.
David. And then look, I understand, I get it. In the heat of the moment, there's an election. They're looking for issues. They do the polling. They go, oh yeah, here's a popular issue. The public is kind of pissed off about this. We're promised to do something about this. That typically that happens, and I get that. But when now that we're trying to deal with that, I hope that they'll recognize that this is a provincial issue, so there could be some legal issues involved here. But we're not even waiting for that. We're working with the province, and as we reform the Real Estate and Business Brokers Act, now called TRESA, we address that issue. The minister asked the question, saying, "Yeah, but we're hearing a lot about this issue. How do we deal with it?" And what they've done, to their credit, provincial, is to say, "Fine. First of all, they agreed with us, with the industry, TRREB and OREA and other real estate boards across the province that it's my property. So
Mhm.
I should be able to market my property as I wish and sell it, the way I see fit. So don't tell me how to sell my property. Let's start with that. And that's the reason why you've had this closed offer process.
Mhm.
And what they've done is they've given the seller the option. And we agreed with this to say, okay, at the seller's option in the new act, and that'll go into effect in April of 2023, The seller can decide if they want to disclose the contents of the offers, all the offers coming in. You know, offer A is offering X amount, offer B, X amount, full disclosure, here's the price, whatever, here are the conditions. But to do that, that's a seller's option. If you want to market your property that way, great. If you prefer the closed offer process, which is what we currently have, stick with that. And we also push for privacy protection to say, as a buyer coming in, A, I should be aware of the rules. You should tell me what type of process you guys are going to deploy. And I will decide whether or not to get involved. And don't disclose my personal information, my name, who I am, that kind of stuff. And that's written in the legislation. That's a big win, right? Hugely successful. So we're hoping that by not waiting for the feds to figure out how they want to get involved, by doing these types of things, you preempt them and say, oh, maybe we don't really have a problem. And by the way, and you know this, David, the whole argument at the federal level that the reason why we have this price inflation in real estate is because of the closed bidding process. People not knowing what others are bidding on, offering for a property. And that will bring price down if we were to open up that process. Well, let's look at jurisdictions where that happens. Australia, New Zealand, Sweden. They have an open process. Are real estate prices going down? No. In fact, every research shows that where they have that open process, the price is actually higher that people pay, not lower. That's the evidence.
Look, when I sit there and I think of like the plain and simple auctioneer, the auction house, and how much people are willing to spend on an item, whatever that be, because they see somebody else who wants it just as badly. 1 + 1 = 2. You're going to be going up. You're not going to be going down based on a process like that.
Right. And
right?
the comeback you're right. And the comeback we always get is that, when people see through the logic of what you just laid out, they'll be like, okay, fine. But transparency, at least, it's out in the open. Okay.
I think one of the issues here as well, when we talk about, affordability and taxes, I mean, like, there's outside issues, which we won't even bother getting into right now. But I mean, we're talking like food supply, we're talking, gasoline, these things are not making it more affordable. And I think from a housing perspective, I mean, I don't want to downplay the importance of food or maybe gasoline, to get around, but the roof over the head, biggest investment we've got, and definitely one of the most important. So, if we're making it harder for people to afford, I don't think that bodes well for anybody. And as we continue that conversation there about, again, taxes, affordability, I guess I'd to kind of take that and wrap this one with a bow. Are there any initiatives that we maybe haven't discussed today or we don't know about, which have been discussed and which we could see potentially coming down the line shortly?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. I think if we look at the local level, I know we talked about the vacant homes tax, but people should realize that's a done deal. That's happening. What we don't know, though, is whether or not the feds will still press ahead with the federal vacant homes tax. So that could potentially happen.
Above and beyond?
Above and beyond, yeah.
Oh
It will be double, just like the land transfer tax, we're paying two taxes. Well, it won't be any different, right? You have one at the local level, one at the national level. Yeah. And they've promised to, and I think they'll act on this one as well, foreign buyers, to ban foreign buyers for 2 years. It looks like they'll press ahead with that. That could raise issues with our friends to the south, unless they have appropriate exemptions. And it looks like they're headed down that path. For instance, they want to exempt recreational property because we know we got a lot of Americans buying in cottage country, right? If you slap on a foreign buyer's tax, what do you think the Americans are going to do? They're going to roll over and play dead, and we know that Canadians are the number one investors in the U.S. in terms of foreign investment. So that's a problem.
They'll just serve it right back to us.
Exactly. So that watch that particular issue. There'll be some movement on that front. Beyond that, bringing it back to the local level. Thankfully, we're really, really pleased about the fact that the mayor has released this 5-point plan because it addresses a lot of things we've been lobbying for years. Purpose-built rentals. Purpose-built rentals are important. You have to incentivize people to produce those units. Right now, it's a private rental space that's been supplying rental units, mom and pop investors, because it just wasn't profitable for people to get involved in that space. So the mayor has promised to act on that front. This one's controversial. He's also promised to ask the province to bring in what he calls a use it or lose it type policy when it comes to developers. Developers are approved to develop this land, and they'll sit on that land, right? It's called the market
Oh,
to a point where they think now's a good time to build, I'll make better profit, whatever. Well, the mayor is saying, not
you buy it,
happening,
build it.
build it. Otherwise you lose that right. You lose that approval that we've given you, and you'll have to go through the entire process all over again.
Does that help us get more shovels in the ground, though?
That's the thing, right?
I
And
mean,
that's
on
why,
one hand, you might say it does. On the other hand, they might go, you know what? Then I ain't buying it.
no, it may be popular politically, and that's why I said that's controversial, and the developers are not
Yeah.
happy about
Yeah.
that. We didn't ask for that, by the way. We're not saying we're supporting that, but that's one thing he's promised. He's also promised to provide city-owned land for not-for-profit development, give it to those groups to develop, and that will help the lower end of the market, right? That segment, and it's got its place. So, those are some of the things that are brewing right now that potentially you'll see happen after the election.
Good things to keep in mind for everybody.
Yeah.
So here, let me completely switch gears here. You wear a lot of hats. We talked about that off the top today. You're an incredibly busy guy. You're very successful, and certainly an influencer for all of us in this industry. And we thank you for everything you're doing. Um, when you're done your day, day's over. You've done everything you could do today, Wednesday, tomorrow, whatever. How do you know it's been a successful day for you?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Never been asked that question, right? David, I always say, and I'm not being coy when I say this. I'm a very positive guy. And I know that the day will have problems. You'll hit roadblocks or what have you, hiccups along the way. But I'm very positive. But I'm not naive. I realize that, especially with the things that I do, the only question in my mind when I start that day is how many problems am I going to have to deal with? Going to have some really, productive things. Be happy about that, but you're going to hit some roadblocks. And the question is, how long will that list be? So for me, a successful day, to be honest with you, is if the list is shorter than what I anticipated, I'm a
Fair
happy
enough.
guy.
Fair enough, man. You know what? I'm with you there. And again, when you look at the amount of issues that you are handling,
You
I
got
got to
it.
imagine that if you could start to chunk through them and come out on the positive side of
Yeah.
at least some of them, things have been good, right?
You're never disappointed.
I love it. I love it, pal. Listen, final words, final tips, final anything that you can share with the audience before we sign off today.
Just to say that it's we're in a good place. I think for our industry. Look, the economy is still relatively strong. Like I said, people are gainfully employed. Demand is still there, so I don't think there's any real threat to the real estate industry as we know it. But just in general, you look around the world and things that are going on. Come on, guys, we could be much worse off position than we are. And I know we can say it sounds cliche, but come on, guys, let's not uh, create first world problems. Let's. But I'm very hopeful. I'm hopeful because I think people are trying to do the right things. David, I mean, as much as I may slam politicians, but they're trying to do the right thing. And when we reach a point where we've got their attention, we say that housing affordability is an issue. We say supply is an issue. They come around. There's no silver bullet, and that's why we're all struggling, right? What are the solutions? How do we deal with this? But the heart's in the right place, and I think that that bodes well for us.
Very great. Like the advice at the end there. I do like that. And I would double down on it. Vaughn, I thank you. If people would like to tap into you further or any of the topics we covered off further, of course, beyond tuning into the Mindshare podcast, is there somewhere they can connect with you or that you would like to direct them to say, hey, go here, learn more about this here?
TRREB.ca is our website, but I'll give you my email address. I don't have a problem with that. Vaughn.palmer@TRREB.ca. That's VON.PALMER at TRREB with two R's, TRREB.ca. Drop me a note and we'll take it from there.
Excellent. Well, I thank you very much today. I think that the insights you shared certainly are things that everybody needs to be thinking about. I love the advice that kind of came off the top and even off the end, and I think I'm going to kind of come back and the message that I want to deliver to everybody listening is communicate, right? Educate yourself, then communicate with your clients and educate them. And the more we do that, the more we can change the narrative of what's happening. At least even in today's current real estate market. The more we know, the more informed we are, the more value we can provide to others, the more we can help people. And the more people we help, the more we get help. That's just the way the world works. So, Vaughn, I thank you sincerely for making the time for us today on the Mindshare podcast.
Well said. That was fun, David. And hit me up on social media. You can find me on Instagram, Palmer Vaughn. You can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook. I'm actually on Twitter as well.
There you go. Check him out, everybody. Make sure you tune in and learn more from Mr. Vaughn Palmer, COO of the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board. Vaughn, I thank you.
I thank you, David. That was fun. Thank you.
You're either listening to this on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Podcast, Stitcher, or Spotify. Or maybe you went to my website, mindshare101.com. And while you're on my site, make sure to download your free copy of the Ultimate Marketing Bundle for Realtors. This is a 31-page ebook packed with a ton of tips and tricks for you. Plus, it's a ready-to-go 90-day social media content calendar to help you build more mindshare so that you can get more market share. And if you want to talk about personalized one-to-one coaching, an in-person keynote talk for your upcoming event, and or ongoing virtual training, just get in touch with our team. We'll set up a free consultation call, learn more about what you're looking to achieve, and how we will help you do just that. Also, don't forget that our push to 100 is on. All you have to do, this is super easy, is go to www.ratethispodcast.com/mindshare101. And of course, if you haven't yet, connect with me on Facebook at Mindshare101 and on Instagram at David Greenspan 101. I want to thank Virginia Munden and the Buzz Conference for sponsoring today's episode. Be sure to visit their website, www.thebuzzconference.com, and follow them on Instagram at The Buzz Conference to keep tabs on all the awesome events they are always hosting, along with getting the latest copy of the Buzz Digital Magazine. And remember, these two dates, these two events. Number one, we've got the Buzz Top Leaders Under 35 Summit taking place on September 29th. And number two, Disruption. Be sure to get your tickets at www.thebuzzconference.com. I also want to thank Kids Keep in Touch Systems for sponsoring today's episode. If you haven't checked us out yet, just go to my site, mindshare101.com, and click on Marketing. This has been another episode of the Mindshare Podcast. Thank you for tuning in.